On June 18, 1812, President James Madison signed the Declaration of War against Great Britain, thus beginning the War of 1812. Despite the poor shape of the American Navy at the time, the early sea battles went surprisingly well for the United States, where sound strategy and good gunnery training allowed several victories against Royal Navy ships. Thus, when in the summer of 1813 the frigate USS Chesapeake sailed into Boston Harbor to challenge the British frigate HMS Shannon, the people of Boston had reason to be confident of victory. The battle that followed would be very brief, but exceedingly bloody, and would give rise to a motto that carries through in the United States Navy to this day. It is history that deserves to be remembered. When war commenced, the British Navy had 130 ships of the line with more than 60 guns, as well as 600 frigates and smaller ships. The U.S. Navy, on the other hand, had only 7 frigates, with 3 more in need of repair, 8 smaller brigs, sloops, and schooners, and 165 gunboats, with 103 of those gunboats then under repair. Things weren't as bad as that implied, however, because most of the Royal Navy was concerned with France. In the spring of 1812, only 1 ship of the line, the 64-gun HMS Africa, 7 frigates, and about a dozen smaller ships were operating out of Halifax. The American frigates included the original 6 frigates authorized by Congress under George Washington in 1794. This included 3 ships armed with 44 guns, the Constitution, President, and United States, as well as the 38-gun Chesapeake, Congress, and Constellation. The original 6 were built to be able to take on British ships of a similar class, but fast enough to outrun British ships of the line. Other ships serving at the beginning of the war included the frigate USS Essex, the brigs Enterprise, Argus, Nautilus, Oneida, Viper, and Siren, the schooner USS Vixen, and the sloops of war Hornet and Wasp. The Chesapeake was launched on December 2nd, 1799. Originally planned as a 44-gun frigate, problems during construction made the builder alter his design to only a 38-gun class. She put to sea amid the Quasi-War, an undeclared war fought at sea between the United States and the French. The Quasi-War was an offshoot of the ongoing wars between France and other European powers, which began after the French Revolution, as the French Navy began seizing American ships trading with the British in retaliation for the signing of the English-American Jay Treaty and Neutrality Act. Before the construction of the original 6 frigates, the United States had essentially no navy. It was protected only by small ships of the Revenue Cutter Service, the precursor to the Coast Guard. Chesapeake put to sea on May 22, 1800, and on June 6th joined an American squadron patrolling American waters and escorting American merchant ships in the West Indies. She captured the French privateer Le Jeune Creole on January 1, 1801. Congress approved the Convention of 1800 in December 1801, which officially ended the Quasi-War. Chesapeake also served in the Mediterranean during the First Barbary War. She was placed in reserve in June of 1803. In January of 1807, she received a new captain and was ordered to relieve the Constitution, which was on patrol and convoy duty in the Mediterranean. James Barron was put in command of the squadron as Commodore. It took several months to repair and crew the ship. The British ambassador informed the captain that 3 of the sailors had deserted from the British frigate, HMS Melampus. After an investigation, Barron concluded that the 3 men were Americans who had been impressed into British service. Barron refused to give up the men, and nothing else was said about the men. On the 22nd of June, Chesapeake left Norfolk for her post. Several British ships, including HMS Leopard, were anchored near Norfolk, blockading 2 French ships in the port. As Chesapeake left, Leopard set sail after her. Several hours later, Leopard approached and sent a request to deliver dispatches to England. When a man from Leopard arrived by rowboat, he delivered a letter that demanded that Barron stop and allow Leopard to search for deserters. The issue was a long-standing one. For years, British ships had been stopping American ships and impressing deserters and American sailors into service on British ships. Barron refused the request and ordered his men to general quarters. Leopard signaled another message, but Barron didn't understand it. The Chesapeake was in trouble. Scrambling to prepare her cannons, the Leopard was already ready and in close proximity. The Chesapeake readied her cannons, but found she didn't have rammers, wads, matches, gun locks, and powder horns at the ready. Leopard fired a warning shot across Chesapeake's bow. When Chesapeake didn't respond, Leopard began firing full broadsides. Even with her cannons loaded, the crew of the Chesapeake couldn't find priming powder, and when some did arrive, they had no matches. In disarray, Chesapeake managed to fire only 1 shot in return, when a lieutenant grabbed coals from the galley to light the gun. After 12 to 18 minutes, Chesapeake struck her colors. The 3 deserters, plus another who claimed to have fled from a British sloop, were seized. Barron offered his ship to the British in surrender, but the British officer refused. 3 Americans were killed, another 18 wounded. The Chesapeake was struck at least 21 times. Barron was court-martialed, found guilty of neglecting on the probability of an engagement to clear his ship for action, and suspended from pay and rank for 5 years. Several others were court-martialed, although only one was dismissed. The event caused an uproar in the U.S., and President Jefferson said that never since the Battle of Lexington have I seen this country in such a state of exasperation as at present. Jefferson pressed England for redress, which was refused. Jefferson banned British ships from American ports and signed the Embargo Act of 1807 in response. After extensive repairs, Chesapeake sailed again in 1809, enforcing the Embargo Act under the command of Stephen Decatur. When the U.S. declared war on England in 1812, Chesapeake was at sea, under the command of Samuel Evans. She captured 6 prizes on a clockwise trip from Madeira to Cape Verde, South America, and back to Boston. On April 9, 1813, she began a refit in Boston. Lurking nearby were several British frigates, including HMS Shannon. Shannon was a 38-gun Leda-class frigate, launched in 1806. For her first 7 years, she was under the command of Philip Broke, who was transferred from HMS Druid. She served during the Napoleonic Wars, including the expedition against Madeira. In 1811, she was assigned to Halifax, and Broke commanded a squadron of 5 ships at the outbreak of the War of 1812. Broke's squadron captured the schooner USS Nautilus on July 17th, the first ship lost to either side in the war. In 1813, Shannon observed the ships at port in Boston, beginning on April 2nd, which included the Constitution, President, and Congress. Broke was known for driving his men to train at gunnery, with British historian William James writing that from the day on which he joined her, the Shannon began to feel the effect of her captain's proficiency as a gunner and zeal for the service. Broke drilled his men often on the cannons, keeping them well trained in case of combat. Each week, each man had 1 morning at the 18-pounders, 1 morning at the carronades, and 2 afternoons with muskets. He additionally thought up hypothetical scenarios and challenged his crew to defend the ship. He had his men fire at a wooden cask thrown overboard in a competition to see which crew could hit the cask the fastest. His gunners were also trained to focus fire amidships to disable enemy gun crews instead of aiming at masts. In the days leading up to the battle, Shannon had captured several U.S. merchant ships and had sent several off to Halifax. He resorted to burning the others because he felt his crew was being dangerously reduced. In the first year of the war, the American Navy had scored several notable victories. USS Essex captured HMS Alert on August 13, 1812, and the Constitution captured HMS Guerriere later that month. USS United States had captured HMS Macedonian in October, and the Constitution took HMS Java in the last days of December. USS Hornet sunk HMS Peacock in February. Captain Evans requested to be relieved of command while the refit was underway, and he was replaced by James Lawrence, who had commanded the Hornet in his victory over Peacock on May 20th. The Chesapeake had some other issues. Much of her crew had left at the end of their 2-year enlistment, frustrated that they had not been paid for the prizes Chesapeake had captured. Lawrence attempted to calm the remaining old sailors down, who were almost in open mutiny. Theodore Roosevelt, in his Naval War of 1812, noted that it was difficult for Lawrence to crew his ship, partially because sailors preferred to ship in some of the numerous privateers, where the discipline was less strict and the chance of prize money much greater. Many of the Chesapeake's crew were foreign, including around 40 British and a number of Portuguese. Lawrence was able to supplement his less trained crew with men from the Constitution, still under repair. Some of the crew were so new that their effects hadn't even been brought below decks when she sailed. Half of the officers and as much as a quarter of the crew were new to the ship. On the morning of June 1st, Broke sent a message into Boston with a freed American prisoner, challenging the Chesapeake to a battle. Broke hoped to battle one of the U.S. frigates, and the president had already managed to slip by. As the Chesapeake now appears ready for sea, the challenge read, "I request you do me the favor to meet the Shannon with her, ship to ship, to try the fortune of our respective flags." For most of the naval battles at sea in the War of 1812, one ship or the other had a significant advantage in class. But Shannon and Chesapeake were almost a perfect match. Chesapeake carried 50 guns, including 28 long 18-pounders, while Shannon carried 52, with the same number of 18s. The most significant difference was in crew complement. Chesapeake had 379 to Shannon's 330. Lawrence never received Broke's challenge, but instead sailed to challenge Shannon on his own volition. Bostonians had high hopes, and many appeared at the shoreline to watch the battle, with one witness describing crowds swarming sailing like bees. Small civilian craft even sailed to watch the fight. "Peacock her, my lads, peacock her," Lawrence encouraged his crew. As Chesapeake approached, Broke gave his orders. "Throw no shot away. Aim every one. Keep cool. Work steadily. Fire into her quarters. Main deck to main deck. Quarterdeck to quarterdeck. Don't try to dismast her. Kill the men, and the ship is yours." The ships met at 5:30 p.m. between Cape Cod and Cape Ann. Neither ship fired as they approached. The Chesapeake drew up on the Shannon's starboard side. Just before 6, the ships opened fire with broadsides. Shannon struck first, causing serious damage to the American forward gun crews, and the Chesapeake's first broadside was fairly ineffective, although her carronades did significant damage to Shannon's rigging. Chesapeake did strike some piled shot for the Shannon's 12-pounders, sending shot across the gun deck. Lawrence realized that Chesapeake was moving too quickly and ordered a pilot's luff, which would involve a small turn that would slow the ship. A second broadside from Shannon did significant damage, including the American quarterdeck. Historian Ian Toll described the quarterdeck as uninhabitable as the surface of the moon. The helmsman and the wheel itself were destroyed. The Chesapeake managed a second round of fire too, and carronade fire struck Shannon's forecastle, killing 3 and disabling the small 9-pounder gun that had struck the American helmsman. One round shot destroyed the British ship's bell. Adrift, without a steering wheel, Chesapeake swung into Shannon, catching on one of Shannon's anchors. A quick-thinking bosun aboard Shannon lashed one of Chesapeake's booms to Shannon. He lost an arm in the process, but he kept the two ships together. The British fired into the aft gun crews, causing significant carnage. A cask of musket cartridges blew up on Chesapeake's deck. Broke ordered his men to board. Lawrence did the same, but his order wasn't heard because the only person on board who could blow a bugle was a dull-witted surgeon's assistant, who was too frightened to blow the bugle. Lawrence was the only officer left on the upper deck. 2 of his lieutenants were already wounded. As an American boarding party reached the upper deck, they found Lawrence mortally wounded by musket fire. As he was taken below, he shouted, "Don't give up the ship." Broke led his men onto the American quarterdeck around 6:02. Without leadership and largely green, Chesapeake's crew broke. The American chaplain marched forward, fired his pistol at the oncoming British. Broke struck the chaplain's arm, nearly severing it. The American Marines attempted to put up a fight on the deck, but many of the 40-man complement were already wounded or dead. More men died as the fighting continued. American sailors were cleared from the topmast, and Lieutenant George Budd and around a dozen men charged the British boarders. "The enemy fought desperately," Captain Broke said, "but in disorder. Fighting what remained of the American defenders, Broke was struck on the head with a sword. The colors aboard Chesapeake were struck at 6:05, only 15 minutes after the first shots. The two ships blew apart, but by then Chesapeake was under the control of around 50 British boarders. Shannon's first lieutenant was killed by friendly fire from Shannon when he attempted to raise British colors over the Chesapeake's. A shot from below deck killed a British Marine, which led British soldiers to fire indiscriminately down the main hatch. A British lieutenant shouted down that, "We have 300 men aboard. If there is another act of hostility, you will be called up on deck one by one and shot." The exact death toll is not clear. The British reported 23 killed and 56 wounded, but American numbers are less clear. Broke reported 70 killed and 100 wounded, while other sources put American casualties between 48 to 61 killed and 85 to 99 wounded. Whatever the exact number, the carnage was notable. Around 20 people per minute were killed or wounded, while in the earlier battle between United States and Macedonian, the rate was only 2 per minute. Shannon took Chesapeake to Halifax. The prize crew aboard Chesapeake kept the captured Americans in line by cutting holes in the main deck and aiming 2 cannons loaded with shot at them. Captain Lawrence died of his wounds en route, and Broke, though he survived, was badly wounded enough that he never again commanded another ship. Chesapeake was taken into British service, was sold in 1819. Timbers from the ship were used to build a mill in Wickham, Hampshire, and that mill is still around today, called the Chesapeake Mill. It was the first significant victory of the war for the Royal Navy against the Americans. It led to many patriotic songs being written in Great Britain, but in the United States it contributed to sentiment against the war, which came to be known as Madison's War. There are several theories as to why Chesapeake lost the battle, including one that claimed the British had used some sort of infernal device to cause an explosion aboard the Chesapeake, but Roosevelt, for his part, in his analysis in 1882, attributed the difference to training and discipline, because, after all, despite significant casualties, the Shannon's crew held, while Chesapeake's crew did not. But in the end, the real difference was in gunnery. Lawrence was fresh off his victory over Peacock, where the British gun crews had performed abysmally, but Broke had his crews well trained and well drilled, and it was their superior gunnery that won the day. Lawrence's last order became a rallying point for the Navy, still used today. Oliver Hazard Perry had the words emblazoned on his battle flag, which flew at the Battle of Lake Erie later that year, a battle that would go notably better for the American Navy. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community at Locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo.